What if the person guiding your healing is secretly guiding your politics? What if the therapy room, the one place built for truth, vulnerability, and growth, has become just another battlefield in America's culture war? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a question that nobody wants to ask. Is your therapist pushing their politics on you? Today on Off the Couch. And welcome to Off the Couch with Dr. Greg, where psychology meets everyday life. I'm here with producer Brian Gomez.
Hey, everybody.
And we have Tony Sweet on the board.
Hello, hello.
Gentlemen, our special guest today is not a person, but an opinion piece I saw 2 days ago in the Wall Street Journal. Actually, it was on October 19th. And I thought this was an important perspective to talk about. So buckle up. This one's going to rattle the couch. Okay, so are you ready? I'm going to start to read this article from the very beginning. This is called Politics Makes for Bad Therapy by Jonathan Alpert. His subtitle is When Practitioners Indulge in Their Own Biases, Patients Can Become More Anxious and Depressed. So I'll start. Politics has invaded therapy. What should be a refuge from judgment has turned into an incubator of division. Instead of acting as neutral guides, too many therapists now act as transmitters of political polarization, diagnosing it, promoting it, spreading it. Therapists often pathologize politics, treating patients with particular views as abnormal or unhealthy, and I've seen this firsthand in my Manhattan practice. In the weeks following Donald Trump's 2024 victory, a patient came to me after his couples counselor demanded that he renounce his politics before she would discuss his marriage. Earlier this year, an Asian American woman told me that prior to her therapist had steered every session back to race and politics, even when she wanted to talk about work-related stress. In both cases, politics wasn't the patient's problem, it was the therapist's solution. That isn't therapy, it's activism posing as treatment. And he goes on just a little bit more. For more than a century, neutrality was therapy's foundation. Sigmund Freud urged analysts to be a blank screen. Carl Rogers spoke of unconditional positive regard, meaning therapists should accept patients without judgment, also empathy and genuineness, and that ethic has collapsed. Today, professional groups host emergency support sessions after elections. In the 2020, American Psychological Association declared racism a public health crisis and urged psychologists to embrace social justice activism. Graduate programs now train students in anti-oppressive methods, and Columbia University's social work curriculum aims to make them understand anti-Black racism and white supremacy are endemic to our systems and our institutions. He goes on. He calls this indoctrination continues after graduation. Therapists are urged to attend $1,500 anti-racism retreats and workshops like Getting Free from Whiteness. These sessions deepen division, alienating the clients they are supposed to serve. The consequences of political division are showing up in therapy. Polarization mimics anxiety or depression with symptoms of withdrawal, broken relationships, and constant stress. Patients cut off relatives, refuse to date across party lines, even demand political loyalty oaths. Brian, I can see you reacting. Hold on. Surveys bear this out. In a recent Reuters Ipsos poll, 27% of Democrats and 10% of Republicans said that politics has negatively affected their relationships. Dating surveys show that 2/3 of Americans insist on political compatibility, and 1 in 6 have ended a relationship because of it. I could go on and on, but I think you got the message of this. Well, it's a rather long thing, but he does repeat the point over and over and over again. What is your reaction?
Well, I feel like we had this conversation a while back too, whenever we interacted with two psychologists where we both, I feel like, saw some red flags in their point of views, in general, in their in who they support in just the world, that kind of what got left us kind of like, if their point of
Was
view
this from
is
the Two Blonde Shrinks
yeah, but I just wouldn't
podcast?
go around
Okay.
and say that. But
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
thank you. Yeah, it's out now.
I
Yeah,
mean, lovely
so
women. I really like them.
yeah, but their points of views or like what they believed in or who they believed in was a little,
Uh-huh.
jarring, especially as women, to love Andrew Tate or whatever. That it was just very confusing, and we even tried to get to like understand that point of view, but it was still really weird. And then we were talking about it, how do they give their clients proper information or like proper guidance or tools, if that's how they view the world, then they're kind of, I would think they would just do the same thing to their clients, right? I mean,
I imagine so, but I mean, I can't say what their therapy is like. I remember one of the women did not see clients, which seemed curious to me. So she had some very definite opinions about how people should be treated, but she did not see clients. But in her defense, she did go and get a doctorate in clinical psychology, so she is qualified to speak of her opinion. But nonetheless, she did not see them actively.
and then I had a question, like, is there somebody, I mean, yes, you guys have a board that
Yeah.
monitors and regulates you guys, but like, I mean, can that even be something brought up to the board, or how does that even work? Like,
Yeah, we could talk about that. It is something you can bring up to the board. Any client can give a complaint to the board. But is this a complaint that will rise to an investigation? I don't know.
probably not.
That would just be one of those things that they didn't like what the therapist was saying versus do they believe that the therapist is indoctrinating them? I'm going to talk about this a little bit more about this person who wrote this, but what did you think, Tony?
Well, I feel the same as Brian. I think as a parent, I mean, as an adult going in to see a therapist, I can always say, yeah, I'm not enjoying this conversation or this advice. I'm going to remove myself from this situation. So it's kind of like a lot of the Republicans say, I don't like what's on television. Well, then don't watch it. But if I had a child I was pairing them up with the therapist, I don't know if I would pair them up with somebody that had different ideological or political views than I did. So yeah, the article was interesting, but because it is difficult to these days. 20 years ago, you could probably date somebody that was on the opposite side of the aisle. Now, I don't know. It would be difficult.
Yeah. And that to going into the dating part, like when I was single, any like on Hinge, pretty for example, you can put like your political view on it. And if it's not on like a certain leaning way, I'm like, no. Even if it says conservative or anything like that, I'm like, no.
Are
It's a
you
big
on
no.
Hinge, Brian?
No, when I was. Yeah. That's what I'm telling you. Before my boyfriend right now, I was very like, nope. Any little sign or anything on their dating profile that gave me some sort of hint that it was like a Republican or conservative kind of point of view, I'm like, nope. Even if they have a little religious symbol on their thing, I'm like, nope. Because in my head, it just, yeah, it all kind of ties together.
So this particular author is named Jonathan Alpert, and it said he's a psychotherapist. So, I mean, instantly my bias comes out. My bias is, someone who calls themselves a psychotherapist doesn't have a doctorate. No, because I would call myself a psychotherapist. I often joke, it spells psycho the rapist, because that's just kind of amusing to me. But he calls himself a psychotherapist, and I'm like, so where did he go to school? And I looked it up. He's based in New York City, but he has a license in surrounding areas, which is really typical of the East Coast because they kind of see people in different regions, or people drive into the city and then they live in a different state. So that's very typical. He holds master's degrees. He holds his master's degree from Yeshiva University, which is based in New York City, and it is a very liberal, as far as I know, based university, and I thought, oh, maybe that's he kind of took issue with his training. I'm guessing, maybe, but a master's degree is actually rather short. It's about 18 months to 2 years, and so it's you're kind of in and out, and so you do learn some significant things, but it's not like you're really wrestling with some of these things. So I thought it was kind of a curious thing that he came from that perspective, because to me he had so many absolutistic beliefs, like this is the right way and this is the wrong way, and I'm like, that just isn't how things work in mental health. There is not a right way and a wrong way, but you know where it works? On the opinion page of the Wall Street Journal. That's where it works, because they're going more for feeling and outrage versus actual facts. So I started to go through this article and I picked it apart, and I picked it apart so much I scrapped apart all my picking apart, because I'm like, this will not be conducive to a conversation. Instead, I wanted to go back. I just picked out a couple of things. Number one, he says, instead of acting as neutral guides, too many therapists now act as transmitters of political polarization. I don't know any therapists that do. I knew that there is one therapist I was aware of who, after something, like after the first election of Trump, she was a very conservative therapist, and she felt free to put out her conservative bona fides and talk about those things. That's even fine, but I don't think she's trying to transmit polarization. She's probably trying to make a connection with her clients. But I don't know anyone who tries to foment division, and I'd be hard pressed. I've never even heard of this until this guy wrote this article. He made it seem rather widespread. Have you heard of it, Brian?
No, and to that point, like, I remember even with like my therapist, you know who it is.
Yeah.
When certain topics that I needed to talk about, like politically, I would ask him or make sure that it wasn't like going at him or his whole way of living or his, anything that would be disrespectful or make him even uncomfortable. And he was so great about it, where it's like, no, this is your space to literally just say how you're feeling about everything, And I thought that was amazing, because then again, it brought me back to that point of view that I'm like, dang, imagine if you felt like you couldn't say that, or you felt like you had to think a certain way while you're in therapy. That would be the worst.
It would be. I mean, have you heard of this, Tony, out where you are? You worked with several therapists who have podcasts who do have certain points of views. Tell me about does that reflect in their therapy?
I never thought it used in like one that I didn't even know. I knew she kind of leaned a certain way, but it's gotten extremely leaning in the last 6 months that I've noticed. And our relationship, when we have a conversation, it's very the same, very caring, loving. But when I see what is being put on Facebook or other social media of theirs, it just baffles me. I'm like, did they get hacked? Because they're so far right that it just does not seem like them when we have the conversation. So then I start questioning, do I know the real person of this person? So
it's a good question, and it's interesting to me, because when you work with clients, you soften as a human being. You soften. You become more aware that more people are more alike than you ever possibly thought, and that whatever the thing that's being presented to you, this is a human being first that's sitting in front of you, and that you are there for them. And they may say and do certain things, but our job as a therapist, we have many jobs as a therapist, but I'm trying to help them to achieve their goals and move them forward, rather than to tell them an opinion that they have is right or wrong. The interesting thing about a therapist being one way in person and another posting differently on Facebook is that to me is the example of the little kid who's hiding behind a brick wall and throwing clods over at people. So you can't really see them, and you can't really see who your victim is. but you're still loving to lob those dirt clods. I mean, it's fun in the moment. We were all kids once, but I, as an adult, try to refrain from those instincts. I don't know about you.
Well, I just have like a thought of like, who is a qualified therapist? That was my bracelet, sorry. Is actually a qualified therapist to go to therapy for? You know, I've never been somebody that trusts anybody that's young for the therapy world. First of all, I feel like they don't have enough life experience in general. Just you have not lived a full life.
When I was young, people would turn away from me. Like I worked at a counseling center when I was in grad school. People would say, "You're too young," and said no. And that, you know what? That was fine. I mean, I was like, okay.
I mean, they're not wrong. It's you haven't.
They were not
lived
wrong.
a long
They were
life,
not wrong.
you know?
And I had to learn along the way. I mean, I actually made a lot of mistakes. And when you're in training, that's what you do. You make mistakes. I hope I make fewer mistakes now, but I would never hold that I don't make any.
Yeah, and then to that point too, it's like, well, how much schooling have they really done, and how much schooling should a therapist do until you feel comfortable enough that they're like qualified to give out, you know? Because my big thing with what's happening in the world right now is there's so many people giving professional advice that it's not always professional advice. It's like people that went through some courses and are calling themselves therapists, and like people are genuinely going to these people thinking that they're gonna fix them and give them the tools, and it's like, dude, they don't even have the tools for themselves most
Now,
of the
you
time.
know, this particular Wall Street Journal piece, if you go on, his whole last part is that people are doing exactly what you're saying. They're going to people who are not therapists because of the polarization that therapists are doing. That's what he's saying. And I'm like,
I think it would be the opposite.
it kind of would be the opposite, which is so funny to me. But it's in fact, that's what he's saying. People turn to TikTok and to influencers because they're getting too much polarization from actual therapists.
And how old is this person? Did you find out who?
He looks to be in his 40s. He looks fairly young himself.
There we go, folks. And that's what I'm saying. It's the
Dumb
other
to
way,
me.
you know? How it's the TikTokers. They're going to the influencers and everything because they're saying what they want to hear, not the actual
That's
things that
just
will
it.
help them.
That's just it. Now, he gives two dramatic examples. A couples counselor who allegedly forced a client to, quote, renounce his politics before the therapist, who he implies is a female, will proceed with the therapy. To renounce his politics. I'm like, I've never heard of anything like that. In fact, that just becomes one more issue for the therapy. If the two people are having a political division, then that's the issue that's presenting. And it probably isn't the only division they're having. It just that happens to be that. How I would work with a couple is I would want to know what their values that they share, what brought them together, and what are the values that they share as human beings. And can they exhibit those values in the face of two different political opinions? Sometimes that can be perfectly done. And I think of who's that dude there's a very famous couple, the Democratic guy, the bald guy, it's from Louisiana. James Carville and his wife. What's her name? Marilee Matlin or Omar. I think that's an actress. But his wife. Yeah, she's a very, very, very conservative Republican, and they are an interesting couple, power couple, and they believe in just the opposite things, which is kind of an interesting dynamic to me because they just love each other. They share the same kind of value system.
Wait, but how is that the same value system when it's completely polar opposites at the moment?
I mean, well, we'd have to break down exactly what people are seeing or feeling or doing. I mean, so I don't know. I haven't like delved into the nitty gritty of those two people's lives, but I've just always been impressed that they had such opposite points of view, and yet that they have been married for years.
I don't know. I'm questioning it now because how can you really have such opposite views and then still love each other? Especially when both sides are against each other right now.
Well, it seems that way. He also gives another example of a therapist who apparently hijacked every session to talk about race and oppression. And I thought this was the Asian American woman, he said, came to him and talked about it when she didn't want to talk about it. I would never talk about race or oppression if the person said, I don't want to talk about that. I mean, if they explicitly say something like that, it seems odd to me that a therapist was doing it. That's why some of this didn't ring true for me. I thought, is he pulling these out of midair? This just didn't ring true. But a person just reading the Wall Street Journal, especially who wants to hear the therapists are bad, is going to glom on to every one of these things. Yeah. In fact, if the therapist did believe that some of this woman's stress, work stress, was race related, then that's kind of interesting, or maybe gender related or something. I don't know. But that would just be a theory. If the woman said, no, I don't believe that to be true, then it's like you put it out there. So if they don't like it, don't believe it's true, then fine, you move on to the next thing. So yes.
Oh no, I'm just thinking. I'm in thought because I'm like, that's why I don't know if like everybody is built for being a therapist. I feel like some personalities, I'm too emotional. I would get too emotionally invested in doing therapy and, probably be clouded by my own biases and push my own, ways of being onto people. And I feel like there are those people that slip through the cracks somehow and are out there doing that.
Well, I mean, yes, there are some people that should not be therapists, and I've certainly worked with them in the past and known about them. I've been kind of surprised by them. At the same time, I really shouldn't have been a therapist. I always thought that I wasn't the natural therapist type. I wasn't an introvert. I wasn't, I don't coo over people. I don't, I'm not, I think I try to be warm, and I think I can be, but I don't think I'm as, like one of these ladies who just, you feel like you're being enveloped by Mother Earth when you see them. But I really trained because to me it was such an important and interesting profession that I really went for it. So I have to say that what I did was build the skill to do it versus thinking, I never thought that I had a natural ability. I felt that I could learn to do it. And that helped me to stay away from hubris, that's false pride, and narcissism, which can get therapists into huge trouble. When any therapist that says, people just naturally want to talk to me, everyone comes up to me at parties and gives me all their problems, I'm like, there's a problem there. If you're trying to get people to always tell you their problems and you're always acting as sounding board, there's a problem there if you can't separate work from your personal life.
It sounds like they love the drama more like it.
That may be.
They want to hear it.
I think some people just want to be important. Yeah, that's exactly it. He also says his thesis is kind of right there. He said he's basically saying that isn't therapy, it's activism posing as treatment. And I'm like, again, it just didn't ring true for me that this is even happening. He claims that therapists have abandoned neutrality and polarization is becoming America's new disorder. To me, polarization has always been there. It's not America's disorder. It may be America, the country's disorder, but it's not the American people's disorder. Because he's likening it all to anxiety and depression, and that is not a new diagnosis. They may have anxiety and depression about these things. They may feel depression about the world or anxiety about what's going on. That's treatable. And they may have it interpersonally with their problem, with their partner. That is a normal couple treatment.
And is this person more like a right-wing leaning person?
No.
Or because that's what it sounds like to me, because the fact that he's trying to paint therapists as such as like a negative narrative about it, I'm like, why would you?
Well, I'll tell you that he did talk in the article about appearing on Fox News regularly, I guess, and that clients have had issue with him doing that. And I'm like, that's interesting to me because I appeared on CNN and I had clients who had issue, like when I was on Nancy Grace's show, like, oh, I don't like her. She does this and this, this and this. And I'd be like, I didn't take it personally, number one. And number two, I always tried to represent psychology in a very dignified way. I didn't try to be sensational in any way. And what we were talking about on that particular show were crimes. But it was just an interesting thing. And I would always assure people that in person, she's actually kind of wonderful. She's very warm and sweet. So she's got a character that she does that I don't think is not her, but I think that interpersonally she's not that acerbic human being. So that's all.
Yeah, it's just, it sounds like this guy is just painting it all like it's one color and that's it, you know?
Well, he does things like blame graduate programs, professional associations, that's like the APA, the American Psychological Association, and identity-based training, suggesting that therapists are now vectors of spreading a pathology. Vectors, we're like the ticks on the body of America, giving things, which is so interesting to me because therapy is not an upstream disorder that causes people to be a certain way. They're an upstream like vector, if you will. They're downstream. They are the thing at the bottom because of all the stuff in the world. People then will turn to a therapist, whether it's in their personal life or professional life, or maybe what's going on in the overall world that we live in.
That's why I'm bringing it up, because I'm already questioning this man's intelligence, his credentials, like everything, because all of this just, if you work in the mental health world, you would know that this is fake news almost.
Well, they don't like that. He had strong words, shocking anecdotes, and you can see why it got attention. It brought forward feeling, not facts. So, Tony, did you see any logical fallacies in this? I'm going to tell you there were I could count 8.
I was going to say there's a few in there.
Too many. And I was like, how can someone read this and not see this problem? People don't read things for logic. They read things for emotion. So, especially opinion pages. That's the thing. First clue should be that it's on the opinion page. This is not a fact. This is an opinion.
We're doing critical thinking, y'all.
Second clue, Wall Street Journal. It is a conservative, Rupert Murdoch led, it's very conservative newspaper, which is fine for the news side, but the opinion side, I mean, sometimes they go way out on a limb. It's very, very biased, and sometimes they downright don't tell the truth, let's just say. And it's interesting because I like to read them once in a while. I actually like some of their writers, should I say? No, I won't say who. But I do like some of their opinion writers. I really do. But I do think you have to look at this critically. You can't say this is a fact. An opinion piece is made to make you think, and I think this one did. Okay, number one fallacy, he does what we call hasty generalizations. He generalizes. He takes 2 little stories from his practice, which I had trouble believing were even true. But let's just give him the benefit of the doubt that they're true. He's saying that indicates the entire profession is collapsing at this moment. It's like going through. That's not data. That's storytelling. That's like me having 2 clients, throughout my entire career or whatever, who confess to bestiality and saying every human being who lives in Los Angeles practices bestiality. I mean, that would just be craziness.
That sounds like our president.
The next one is straw man argument. This one bugs me the most. I see people do this all the time. A straw man argument, just to explain it. A straw man argument, and you'll hear people go, that's a straw man, but they never explain it, which kind of bugs me too, because I don't think it really, unless you understand, you don't really know what they're talking about. A straw man argument is where somebody's arguing something to you, and you build a straw man, and you argue with that rather than the person. So basically you say, somebody's saying, I guess to use a political argument, I'm pulling this one right out of my, you know what, the political one going on right now, the shutdown that's going on is that, the Democrats are saying they want the Affordable Care Act funded and Medicaid, et cetera. Like they want that restoration of those things that have been taken away in the new bill. Okay, fine. That's what they're asking for. It's their negotiating point. But the other side is doing a straw man argument, and they do it over and over again by saying the Democrats want to fund illegal aliens. They want to give health care to the illegal aliens, and they even put billions of dollars on the amount. And they want to fund illegal aliens. And you're like, that's legally impossible for them to do that, number one. And they could write that into the bill when it's already illegal. They could be in charge of it, but what they keep doing over and over is saying they won't negotiate because that's what they want. They want to do this thing that is not true, but they basically built a straw man that they're knocking down.
And they do it for everything. Every
It does happen a
action,
lot.
Everything.
In this article, he paints culturally aware therapy as indoctrination. That was scary to me. Culturally aware therapy is not one size fits all. You've got to understand that people's lives are different according to what they look like, who they are, male, female, socioeconomic status, education, of course, race, ethnicity, religion. I mean, there's so many things that you've got to be aware of.
He sounds just like the administration, honestly.
I'm just basing it on this one article. In reality, multicultural competence is helping clients feel seen. And so multiculturalism is kind of a buzzword in the therapy world. But all it is saying, people are different. Like, you've got to understand that. And you can't say one size fits all. Then you are shaking your finger at them saying, you should be X, Y, and Z. What I do with people is I say basically, and I learned this, did a fellowship with Albert Ellis, who's one of the leaders in cognitive behavioral therapies. He developed rational motive behavior therapy, is considered the grandfather of cognitive therapy. So I'm there on my fellowship, and it's a very wonderful fellowship, people from around the world. I was one of, I think, 12 or so people. I mean, I'm buzzing on the number because we did add another person as we went. Anyway, it's a long story.
We needed to know that.
Yeah, well, here nor there. But, I was one of a couple of Americans, and then we had these people from all over the world. Well, one woman was from Pakistan, and I said, does this apply, to what you're working with in Pakistan because it's such a different culture than American culture? And she said, in a very loving and condescending manner, she said, my dear, irrationality is cross-cultural. And I was like, of course, it makes perfect sense to me that we're not dealing with the culture. We're dealing with how beliefs work. And that is basically the same in every language, every culture. But what the beliefs are, that is individual to the culture. Does that make sense? So how they function, which is a lot of what that therapy is built around, is cross-cultural. So I was like, you learn more from your fellow students sometimes than you do from other people. Yeah. So multiculturalism is not about activism. It's not about conversion. It's not indoctrination. You're actually trying to connect with the client. That's the whole issue. He also does something that, this is where my bias comes in. Can I be a real...
Do it.
Yeah. This is where I thought this is a master's level person who doesn't know his research. He implies therapists are causing polarization. He's mixing up a correlation with he's seeing more polarization in the country and blaming it on therapists. That's correlation mixed with causation. There's a correlation. You could say all babies all heroin addicts drank milk when they were babies, but that don't mean that all babies who drank milk become heroin addicts. Does that make sense? That's correlation, not causation.
I don't know if this psychologist or the administration know the difference because they sound exactly alike.
And I feel like I put down, and I'm not trying to say having a master's degree. I actually think some fairly amazing therapists, and some of my very favorite supervisors have been master's therapists. So please don't think I have a bias in that way. But the way he was presenting public information concerned me greatly. So social media, new algorithms, political tribalism, those are driving polarization. Those
Is driving polarization through this article alone.
Well, this is a media source, isn't it? And it's not like Karen, the LPC or MFT from Pasadena, therapist doing her best out there. She's not driving it. He also used loaded language, which I thought was especially problematic. He used civic sabotage later in the article, vectors. We talked about America's new disorder. The word that bugged me the most was indoctrination. Like, really, come on.
That's their favorite word, though.
Yeah.
On that side.
All it does is activate emotion. It doesn't illuminate the truth. What does that mean? He's wrong about everything? No. In fact, he was kind of saying some things that are true, but even the stuff, the way he was presenting it, I'm like, I would take issue with that. The way he was presenting Freud was not neutral, by the way. Freud was very politically active. Rogers was also and was very much into social justice. That's the guy he said unconditional positive regard. But that is not judging the person. You can judge their behaviors or belief, or like you can judge certain things. You're just not judging the human in front of you. It's sort of like unconditional positive regard of the human being versus, let's say, if they're an axe murderer, then you might judge that behavior to be quite bad. So, and that is totally allowed. So I thought it was kind of interesting. He kind of cherry picks. So anyway, it's a conversation worth having, but I think he had it in such a one-sided way. It didn't actually illuminate questions. In The Exorcist, did you guys ever see The Exorcist? One of the greatest, if not the greatest horror film ever made. The pea soup. Well, she throws up pea soup. Okay, so in The Exorcist, the older priest who's experienced in exorcisms, there's a little girl who's Linda Blair, is possessed by the devil. And this older priest is familiar with exorcism, and this younger priest is called in. Anyway, he calls there. The older priest who's experienced says, the demon is a liar. He will confuse us. She's talking about the devil. The demon is a liar. He will lie to confuse us, but he will also mix lies with the truth to attack us. This attack is psychological.
Sounds like Trump.
So it's psychological and powerful, he says. And he's saying that to the young priest. But we have to get honest about the evidence. So let's look at what the research really says. Don't you guys really want to know if this is really happening? This is kind of interesting to me. There are studies, and I put all of this in our YouTube notes. I found these studies, and they're interesting, and so also some think pieces about these things, so people can really wrestle with these ideas themselves. But here's what we know from the real studies. 87% of therapists report talking about politics in therapy. And I would be among them because I don't necessarily bring it up, but if client brings it up to me, I will engage. I don't say, I'm sorry, this is not a political space.
Well, yeah, a lot of the problems and stressors happening right now are due to political climate that we're in. So it's kind of hard not to talk about
I think
politics.
it is hard not to talk about it.
It causes a lot of the anxiety, fear, and all the craziness that we're all dealing with on every aspect of it, You're being affected one way or another.
Therapists who believe their clients shared their politics, so basically same political beliefs, reported stronger alliances. And that I've noticed too. And I've looked for commonality even in my clients who are conservative. I did have a client once come in though, and he had read an article I wrote. This was a funny piece I put in the Huffington Post. It was kind of a sassy snark piece from, I would say, 10, 15 years ago. And it was just a fun piece, but I was kind of questioning our rigid morality around sex, etc. And he said that when he read that, he couldn't see me anymore. He said that that was very upsetting, that we don't share the same values, that he believes in, you know, like the Mormonite, oops, that the ideal of what a family structure is. And I totally respected that. I was like, oh yeah, okay. I go, if you have any questions, let's talk about it. And he was pretty wonderful too. He was saying, yeah, these are my things, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we actually had a good discussion, but we did in therapy.
And that's kind of normal. I feel like you kind of need somebody specific for you, or
Yeah.
you know, for your liking in
And I was
therapy.
okay with
you
that.
know,
Yeah.
it's like dating almost. Not everybody's gonna fit everybody's match.
Well,
you
my
know?
feeling is that they're there for themselves. I'm to provide a product to them. But if my product is not quite as good as someone else's product, then please go to somebody else's product. You know, if you're not going to find it at Macy's, go to Gimbel's. Like, it's okay if you go to a different store to buy what you need. And I'm okay with that. So when clients feel judged politically, they do shut down, mask, and drop out of therapy. So if they feel judged, yes. If they feel shamed, yes. So if a therapist is actually doing that, then yes. But therapists make that mistake every now and then. They do believe that there's a right way and a wrong way, but that is an absolutistic belief. The author of this article is doing exactly the same thing. He's saying there's a right way and a wrong way. And in fact, he's wrong.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to be as absolute, but to say we have to consider many factors. We can't just say there's a right way and there's a wrong way. Multicultural competence, which is like a buzzword within the therapy world, acknowledging people's identity, that's how they see themselves, their culture, their systematic factors, how the world sees them, how they have to exist within the world, improves therapeutic engagement. So when you actually understand these things and can speak about them, the clients really appreciate that and feel like they can talk to you, especially for marginalized clients.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed I never felt you know, ashamed to say anything to my therapist, or felt like I couldn't. Because I mean, that is kind of the point. Like, they're supposed to be the one person you can tell anything and everything to, and like be okay, you know?
Well, and the reality is I went to therapy and I disagreed with my therapist sometimes, and I would tell him. And I'd be okay if people disagree with me here. And in fact, I always try to be open, not defensive. I consider it their experience. Like, if that's their belief, that's their experience, I want to know, because we could fit it into the total issue. I'm not saying there's a right and wrong way to be in the world, but there is a total construct that we can understand people the best to help them move forward to achieve their goals. So here's the paradox. Talking about politics can help or hurt, depending on the intent, the skill, and the ego of the therapist. So if they have a big ego, and I'm guessing Mr. Wall Street Journal, I mean, at least from some of his statements, they reflected an absolutistic belief system. When a patient uses politics to understand a client's lived reality, when they, you know, that is helpful. What's it like? You know, what's your experience? When a therapist uses politics to impose their own worldview, that's harmful. That's not a left or right issue. That's a clinical issue. It's a skill issue, because a therapist, in many ways, they're paying you for therapy, and you could sit there and talk about yourself the whole time if you want. When clients ask me about me, I'm truthful. I state what I'm comfortable saying. If they said, oh, you know, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I had an example. I was working at UCLA doing research, drug abuse research, and I was interviewing people who were heroin addicts. This guy, heroin and cocaine addict. So this guy came in to do the interview. He sits down across from me. He was obviously did not want to see me. And for those that are just listening, I'm a tall white guy, and I look very conservative. So when I sat down in the room, I was in my 20s. I was working in research at UCLA. This guy comes in, he says, oh, I don't want, he goes, I know who you voted for. You voted for, and it was, I think Duke Majan at the time, who was a California governor who was a Republican. And I said, no, actually I voted for Mayor Bradley because that was the truth. Mayor Bradley was the LA mayor at the time, black, black person to, I think, run for governor at the time, would have been the first black governor in California. And it was just, and it was a moment that he really appreciated that I was very open about who I was. And then he said, oh, okay. And then proceeded. And that was really key because I had about a 2 to 3 hour interview ahead. Imagine if he felt like I was aggressive to him.
Yeah. He thought you were on his side in that sense.
In that sense, yes. But I didn't, if I had voted for Duke Majan, I would have said that too. I would have said, yeah, and let's talk about it. Because I would have wanted to have a communication about that. But I wouldn't have brought it up had he not. I wouldn't have done that therapist thing like, what do you think? And why would you be asking me that question? I could skip to the point. He was asking me that question because he wanted to know, am I a safe person to be with? I mean, come on. That's why you're asking a question. So, why not help them find the safety, even if your answer isn't quite what they're looking for? So here's the Wall Street neutral. The therapist neutrality is a figment. It is not true. You walk into a therapist's office, you see where their office is. If they come to mine, they're going to see what car I drive. They're going to see how my office is decorated. They'll meet me. They'll see my age. They'll see that I'm a male. They'll probably figure out that I'm gay pretty quickly. And there are all those types of things that happen in the relationship, and that is just not something you can control as a therapist. So therapist neutrality is not the same as therapist silence. So when they're talking about neutrality, it's really that you're just trying to be there for the client and not trying to impose your own, perspectives, biases per se. Also, a cultural attunement is not political indoctrination. We need to understand identities and systems and the impact of systems, and without preaching to the people, but it is helpful for us to understand those things because that's part of a person and what they live with. And also the client autonomy, like what the client wants, takes precedence over the therapist's agenda. I always tell clients, I go, it's like we're in a driver's ed car. I go, I'll help. I'll sit there and I'll say, turn here, turn here. It's up to you to turn the wheel, and you're the one pressing on the gas. I may push on the brake, but I'm not going to press on the gas. So they can move it forward or not. And if they need to stop, they can stop it. So the answer isn't therapists must be a political blank screen. The answer is that therapists must not make the session about themselves, period.
I agree.
So therapy is not activism. It's also not Switzerland, where we just are completely don't answer anything. A therapist's job is to understand your world, not recruit you into theirs. And but I'll tell you, if a client and I share something, I may say, oh yeah, or they're talking about a movie. Oh yeah, I saw that movie. And we can talk about it. Maybe they're sharing a movie with me and they say, oh, this would be a good movie to see. Sometimes I'll watch it. Sometimes I won't. But it's often helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's normal to have that kind of relationship with your therapist too. You want to feel connected in that way, and that they know you as a person, not just as a random client that they're coming in.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we are paying for that service, you know?
are, which puts you in the customer's always right category. And if the customer doesn't like it, the customer cannot come back. If a political or cultural force is shaping your pain, you should talk about it. If you're feeling prejudice, racism, identity stress, if you are watching TV and getting more polarized, if you're on social media all day long and you feel assaulted, then my God, talk about it. And the therapist most of the time, I think 99% of the time, maybe not this guy, will be like, hey, whatever your perspective is, let's talk about it. It's okay.
Yeah. Even if it's just venting from those frustrations, I feel like it's the best thing to do. I always looked at my therapist as like my diary, or anything I wanted to talk about or felt like I wanted to like talk to somebody, Yeah, that I always thought of it as my like little diary.
So, how do you protect yourself from politically loaded therapy?
Are you asking us?
No,
Oh.
I have
Sorry.
these things, but it's so interesting to me. I'm like, this isn't an issue I think that's most out there.
No.
I think I think paradoxically, the author of this article, people that go to see him, probably because he does appear in conservative media and he's publishing the Wall Street Journal and he's writing a book now called Therapy Nation. I'll give him that plug, which is out next year. And it is about this stuff, and it looks like a very biased forward account. Putting forward this point of view, which means he'll get a lot of play and they'll demonize therapists. And it's really sad to me. So how do you protect yourself?
And those are the people that need therapy the most. That mental illness
Well,
is alive and thriving on
I'm
that
sure
side.
he's not driven as much as he is by less about. I'm sure he's less driven by
Facts?
facts and more driven by
Emotion?
money.
Oh, emotion and money. Hate and money.
Which he's doing a good job with getting attention. Here I am talking about him. So, how do you handle political and cultural issues if they come up in therapy? Watch for red flags. So, if you feel judged for your worldview, by golly, say that. Absolutely say that. And it's okay for you to never come back. If you're being corrected, if a therapist is correcting you, not understanding you, it's really important to understand. Every issue is reframed. Or another red flag is if every issue is being reframed into the therapist ideology. And I think this is tough because I reframe things into an understanding of cognitive therapy and sort of what are the rubrics of that. And, if something's an absolutistic belief versus a more flexible belief, and I'm trying to help them in that. What you do deal with the content, but you're trying to help them see the nuts and bolts of it the whole time. It's not that you're trying to put forward an ideology. I could do this in any approach. And one of the things when I was on fellowship, one of the trainees, these were like master's level people who were in a different program there. This guy was from a seminary, and he talked about how this is really perfect for religious counseling because they deal with these issues too. And they're very, they deal with the intellectual issues from a religious point of view. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. And remember, you can always say to your therapist, I don't want politics or any other issue you talk about to be part of the treatment. I will tell you, a good therapist will honor that, but also a good therapist will go, I wonder what that's about. And then maybe even ask you what that's about, and probably have a red flag up in their head for a while, like going, what is it that they're avoiding? So it is curious to me. You could actually say that therapists will avoid it, but I think therapists are going to question it too.
Yeah, because why would you? I mean, that's the whole point of going into therapy, to face the things that are causing you to spiral or stress or anxiety or any of the things, I mean, yeah. But you want to go and deal with it there.
You want to go and deal with it, but here I'm putting forward my opinion about how things, quote, should be, but I hold that people have different opinions. I'm just not the same therapist who, someone could come see me and they'd be quite satisfied, and I have other people who may not be as satisfied. I tend to have very happy clients overall, but I can also, there are individuals who just weren't a match, like that one example I gave.
And I feel like, that's what we go to therapy for, to deal with the things that are causing us, impairments in life, or just wanting to be able to thrive. So the things that we're not wanting to talk about, that would be weird. You're paying money to fix these things.
Well, and the fact is, if you're actually feeling like the therapist is trying to push a political agenda on you, then they're kind of holding you hostage and making you pay to get out at the end of the hour. I mean, it's not really a helpful thing to happen. But if you're having a political discussion with your client, even if they have a different political point of view, if it's respectful and eye-opening and it does reflect some things, therapists don't have to agree with everything. My goodness, they're human beings too. But if you're having that discussion, then that's just fine. You know, it's up to you as a client how you feel in there and to say when something's problematic. I'll tell people, I'm going to, I'll put forward what, my rules are, et cetera, but I'm going to ask you to also, if you have any issues with me, like I'm late or I, do something, or I give you too much homework because I give homework, or I do this, I go, I want you to bring that up with me. And I go, because that'll help me guide the treatment. And people often are surprised by that, but it actually does help the treatment quite a bit when I know what their perspective is. So whatever it is, and to know what I'm doing in that moment that's not helpful. So I guess we're at the end, huh, guys? Yeah, thanks for joining us for Off the Couch. Hey, leave a comment telling me, have you experienced politics in therapy, whether good, bad, or ugly? I want to hear your story. Brian and I both do. Don't forget to rate, review, and follow us on Off the Couch. Follow Off the Couch with Dr. Greg. That's the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Oh, we're on TuneIn. Thank you, Tony. Also, links to the studies on YouTube. You can see us if you want to see us. You can go to youtube.com/Dr. Greg. And we also have a handout today, which is a guide to talking to your therapist about these things. I put that together for us. So hit us up on socials at Ask Dr. Greg. This is Dr. Greg, Brian Gomez, and Tony Sweet bidding you farewell. Until next time, be present, be flexible, and be kind.